Hello friends! Today is quite a gloomy day, but I have a joyous topic to talk about. I want to dive into 14 books that are releasing in 2026 that I'm especially excited about. If you've been following my channel for a while, you probably know that I'm not really the kind of reader that follows new releases too closely. I will see some new releases pop up on other people's channel and get interested in them. I have no objection to reading new releases, but I used to be much more into the know of what's going out. I mean, especially in the French market when I was doing my creative writing masters a while back. It was quite a few years ago already, and at the time I was very much kind of keeping track of what was coming out on the French publishing scene and all of that. That has changed quite a bit, and now I'm much more of a mood reader. I don't really care that much about when a book comes out. So I was not really destined to make that kind of video, but I've watched Lynn's video about fantasy and sci-fi books releasing in 2026, and that got me really excited, and she encouraged me to post that video, so here we are. A lot of those books are also fantasy and sci-fi, but not all of them. I have a bit of a variety of genre, and I don't know how I'm gonna wait for some of them to be published because I am genuinely so excited about them. By the time you're watching this, we're already well into February, so I am a bit late to the game, to the point that a couple of those books have already been published. But in a way it's good news because it means that you can read them right away if you're so inclined. So without further ado, let's dive into the books. The first one is Nightshade and Oak by Molly O'Neill, and it released on February 3rd, so it's already out. And this is a fantasy novel with, from what I've gathered, some sapphic romance going on as well. This is the story of the goddess of death who accidentally, by a wayward spell, is turned into a human. And she's not really fitted for a human life, so she's kind of struggling with basic things like gathering food and making a fire. So she pairs up with a warrior to journey back to the afterlife and hopefully restore her godhood. So as I said, there seems to be some sapphic elements to the book, so I think we can expect some attraction to happen between that human turned goddess and this warrior. It sounds like a really fun one, and I'm quite excited about this take on having a goddess turned human and seeing how she's grappling with day-to-day stuff that we human have to do. I think it's quite a fun concept, and I'm curious to see how it's been executed. Next, we have a literary fiction about female friendship, which is a topic I'm always excited to read about. This is Love by the Book by Jessica George, and it just released on February 12th, so it's also already out, just fresh out of the press. In this book, we are following two main characters. The first one is Remy, who is part of this tight-knit group of friends, but she unfortunately feels like her friends are kind of moving away from her, both in a physical, like literal way, and then a metaphorical one. One of her friends is moving to another city, another one is having a baby, and then the third one is kind of entangled with a boyfriend that seems to be a bit toxic, and so she's feeling a bit lonely for the first time in a very long time. And then we have Simone, who is the kind of woman who feels like she doesn't need friends, all she needs is her family. But when her family turns away from her, then she finally has to grapple with loneliness. Those two women meet in a bookshop, and even though it might not be insta friendship clicking perfectly together from the beginning, they might still find what they need in each other. As I said, I love stories about female friendship, and so I'm curious how this one will unfold. The third book on my list I actually already read. I was very lucky to get an advanced reader copy for it, and I really enjoyed it. This is Cleopatra by Saraa El-Arifi, which is going to be published on the 24th of February, so only a few days away. This is a historical fantasy, and from the title you already gathered it's a book about Cleopatra, the famous pharaoh, and it was such an interesting read. I loved the narrative choice. So the story is told in the first person by Cleopatra herself, but she's addressing us, the reader, directly, and she's kind of looking back on her life from the present day. So it's kind of like we're hearing the story from her ghost in a way. And I love this kind of almost omniscient kind of narrations. So I really, really enjoyed that choice. And the book is very much focused on Cleopatra as the person that she was, as both the very proud, confident woman, but also a very flawed one. And so I really appreciated the contrast that the author built in this story. It's also mainly centered around her relationships and how she evolved as from a young girl to a ruler, and then the myth that she kind of became. I wouldn't have mind a little bit more political context, to be honest, because we don't go into the details of what's happening in Rome. Obviously, she's very much entangled with some of the powerful figures from the Roman Empire, but we don't see a lot of, again, like the political scene from that front. And I came into the book kind of realizing that I knew very little, if not nothing, about her as a political figure. And so I think I would have enjoyed a little bit more political context, again, to understand exactly what was going on. But on the other hand, I think for some readers, it's not going to be a hindrance at all, because it makes for a shorter book, like an easier read. I think it's fairly short and easy to get through. And again, it's very much focused on Cleopatra herself. Also, it is beautifully written. The prose is very rich and lush, and I really enjoyed it. So I would recommend Cleopatra. On the same day, we have a literary fiction release from Francesca Manfredi, translated, I believe, from the Italian by Ekin, Oklap, and this is The Silent Period. This is the story of a 28-year-old disillusioned woman who one evening decides to delete her social media profiles. And from what started as a digital detox, she kind of slowly falls into an act of self-effacement, and she stops talking until one day she actually completely disappears. Her sister goes looking for her, and she discovers in her search a quieter, stranger world than she ever imagined. This sounds very mysterious and very intriguing, and I'm hooked. I definitely want to read this. Next, we have Shut Up and Read by Channing Cook. This is a memoir coming out on March 10, and with a title like that, how could I not be intrigued? This memoir is about Harriet's Bookshop, a bookstore inspired by Harriet Tubman, who was an American abolitionist and social activist. The store opened in February 2020, so barely 6 weeks before the COVID pandemic forced it to shut its doors, not knowing if it would survive. Fast forward 5 years, the shop survived and it's actually thriving. And so this memoir is recounting the trajectory of that bookshop, how Janine went from opening it to a period of really deep uncertainty and to making this endeavor a success. This sounds like a delightful read, and I can't wait for it to come out. Moving on to Love is an Algorithm by Laura Brooke Robson. This is a romance sci-fi coming out on March 31st, in which we are following Danny, who is a very anxious man. And so his relationship to Eve is an antidote to his anxiety until the point that it's not anymore, and he starts to worry about his relationship if things aren't going well and all of that. That leads him to develop an app that helps you quantify your relationship's health and potential. This is a huge success, and people start to outsource key decisions in their life to this AI assistant. Eve, on the other hand, is a musician, and she very much relies on emotions and authenticity to write her songs and for her career. So she doesn't look on this app with much fondness, especially if her relationship with Danny might turn into a whole modern experiment. This sounds very intriguing, and I'm also quite excited to be reading this because I feel like sci-fi romance might be the next niche to gather some traction. We've had a lot of successes with mixing romantasy and fantasy, and so I'm curious to see what might happen with romance and sci-fi. This one sounds more like a contemporary romance with a sci-fi twist on it, but it still sounds quite fun, and I got an advanced reader copy for it as well, so I'm excited to dive in. Next, we have Burn the Sea by Mona Tewari. This is the first book in a duology that's published by Boundless Press, which is a small imprint led by Janani, who is another booktuber that I personally love and have been following for a while. So I'm excited to be reading this book. This is a historical fantasy. I'm not sure about the publishing date. I've seen two dates, 21st of April and June 4th. So we will see. But this is a reimagining of the Portuguese kind of colonization of South India in the 1500s. And I have a sweet spot for South Asia. I did a bachelor in South Asian studies and I do love fantasy. So a book that kind of brings those two together, I'm always going to be intrigued and excited about. We are halfway through, and at number 8, we have At Sea by Yasmin Abdel-Majid. This is a literary environment thriller coming out on May 5th. And if that is not enough to get you excited, I don't know what will. In this book, we are following a female driller who is taking charge of an offshore oil rig with an entirely male crew. So she's coming into this environment of high pressure, lots of responsibilities, having to prove herself at every turn, while also figuring out what is going wrong and potentially preventing a whole disaster. This sounds so gripping, intense, that I really can't wait, to the point that I've been aware of this book for a little while, and at some point I thought about it and I was like, oh, I want to read it now, and I was looking for it, trying to purchase it, because I had forgotten that it's only coming out in May. So I'm a bit frustrated and impatient, because it's definitely been on my mind, and yeah, I'm hooked. I really want to read it. It sounds incredibly tense and just the premise is really good, so I can't wait. Next, we have a sci-fi with Sublimation by Isabel Kim. This is coming out on June 2nd. And again, this is a book with an incredible premise. In this book, when you immigrate, you are basically split in two. And so one part of you goes to the new country, whereas another part leaves behind. And so some people will keep in touch with their other selves back home, kind of trying to keep in touch, keep up to date, in the hope of one day reintegrating and becoming one again. This is not the case with Rose. She left Korea when she was 10 years old and she hasn't looked back since, until she's actually called back home to Korea when her grandfather passes away, and she finds out upon her return that her other self is actually trying to steal her life back in America. Again, this sounds incredibly exciting. I can't wait. I also have an advanced reader copy for this book, and I can tell you I won't be waiting until June to read it. Okay, we're now moving into the second half of the year territory. So some of those books don't have a cover yet. Things are a bit more blurry, but still very exciting. This one is a bit of a special one. This is Theodora's Tea Shop by Christy Ann Jones. And Christy is another YouTuber. I love her channel. I've been following her for years and years and years. This means that I've seen the whole process through her videos of her writing this book, getting her agent, getting her book deal. And so I'm really excited for her book to finally be published. It's coming out on July 28th. And I already have a buddy read planned with my friend Hannah about this book, because we're both equally excited to see Christy's book to be published. So Theodora's Tea Shop is a 1920s inspired fantasy in which we're following Dot, a timid, chronically ill woman who travels to the capital of Aliaster to seek apprenticeship with the vibrant witch Theodora. And behind the quaint facade of her tea shop, Theodora is actually running an illegal underground magic syndicate, which sounds quite fun. But when her past comes back to haunt her, it might take her, the tea shop, Dot, and the whole city of Aliaster down with it. This sounds so good. And again, I've heard Christy talk about this book for years at this point, and it feels a bit surreal that in a few months I should be able to hold it in my hands. Next, we have A Snake Among Swans by Hannah Kanner. This is a fantasy, the first one in a trilogy, I believe, coming out on July 30th. In this book, we are following Tilde, who is the only survivor of a conquered land. And in order to unite the people, she has to marry the aging king and to bear him a son, an heir. But some people are not seeing her position from a very friendly place. And that makes the court a very dangerous situation to navigate for her. But what they don't know is that Tilde also has her own allies, her own hidden power, and that she's ready to sacrifice everything to claim back her kingdom. This sounds like your classic political fantasy. I loved the Fallen God trilogy by Hannah Kanner, so at this point I'm willing to read whatever she puts out, and so I'm very curious to read the first book in her next trilogy. Next, we have another book from an author that I loved some book before. This is Sophie Standing There by Meg Mason, who is the author of Sorrow and Bliss, one of my favorite books from 2025. For this one, I'm not sure of the publication date. I've seen both 27th of August and 8th of September. This is a literary fiction, but also I've seen slightly different summaries depending on the platform. So my understanding is that we are following Sophie, who is the character in the title, and she seems to be a very lovely kind of person. She is very close with her brother. She has a dream job, I think, at a literary festival. She is a dear friend to Emma. She was married and all of that, and somehow when we pick up the book, she is living somewhere else. She moved out of the house she was sharing with her now ex-husband. I think she might be having some strife with Emma. So we don't really know what's happening, but she is experiencing a lot of loneliness. And so her way of coping is to be reading books. And that leads her to a specific author who she starts reading all the books from and kind of dreaming of meeting this author, which she never will, obviously. So again, the blurb is a bit enigmatic. We don't have a lot of details, but having read Meg Mason before, I think we can expect another kind of bittersweet, poignant book about relationships and how we form connection. So I'm really, really eager to read that one as well. The next book is Espiritu by Aidan Thomas. This is a sequel to Cemetery Boys, which is a book I've talked on my channel quite a bit already, and this is a fantasy with a lot of own voice LGBTQIA plus representation. It's coming out on September 8th and I can't wait. I'm a bit conflicted. I don't feel like I really give you a summary of the book because I feel it would spoil some of the things from book one in the sense that it just like tells you where we end up. So I don't want to do that. But what I can do is really, really encourage you to go check out Cemetery Boys if you haven't done already. And yeah, if you've read it, you probably know how excited I am about Espiritu coming out on September 8th. And our final book is none other than Mothblood by Lee Dae-jung, the authortuber that I was mentioning at the beginning who inspired this whole video. And same, I've been following her for a little while, not as long as Christy, but I've still seen and followed kind of her path to publication, so I'm very excited for her novel to be coming out. This is a dark academia adult fantasy coming out on October 13th, I believe, in which we are following an alchemist studying in Paris who ends up in a situation where she has to solve a murder mystery. It sounds very rich, full of intrigue, again, kind of that gothic vibe, magic, alchemy. It sounds really, really exciting. The cover just got revealed a few days ago and they look stunning. I would love to get my hands on the US edition, but looking at my local kind of providers, I think I will have to go for the UK one. which is still gorgeous. So honestly, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, I'm really excited for it. Again, coming out in October. And so those were all the 14 books so far that I have on my radar coming out in 2026. Let me know in the comments below which books you are most excited about, or if there are other books on your radar that are coming out in 2026. And if you're not sure what to comment, you can just put the pile of books, because that's very much on theme. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye. This sounds like a delightful read. This sounds like a delightful read. This sounds like a delightful real. Oh, I can't speak. This sounds like a delightful read. Delightful read. Delightful read. Okay, I can do it.